Welcome. You're listening to The Weather Lounge, a podcast by WeatherWorks. Get ready to explore the world of weather and connect with engaging guests, bringing you fun and thought-provoking stories of just how weather shapes our lives, sometimes in ways you've never imagined. So, join us as we unravel the mysteries of the atmosphere. Today's episode starts right now.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Weather Lounge. I'm your host, meteorologist Brad Miller, and our podcast comes to you from our WeatherWorks headquarters, located in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And joining me today here in the lounge is fellow WeatherWorks meteorologist Jen Diorio. Hey there, Jen.
Hey there, Brad. Good to be here on the podcast. As always, we got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about today. And also joining us is our favorite producer, meteorologist Mike Priante.
You really mean that? Favorite producer?
You're our favorite number one producer, Mike.
I'm the only producer. There's no one else here.
Well, that makes you an easy favorite then.
Okay. Well, yeah, but that's more like by default. Like, what if someone else comes by and then you're like, oh, actually, that guy's my favorite.
You'll always be our favorite.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I think we're going to do something a little bit different here, guys. Of course, we're in the midst of winter, and we've got some weather questions into the podcast, and if you have any also going forward, check us out, WeatherWorks or Weather Lounge at weatherworksinc.com. So we figured we'd address some of these questions today. It'll explain a lot about precipitation types that we actually covered before in a previous podcast a few years ago. I think it was actually in the winter of 2021. So if you want to go back and check that out, but it's gonna be a little different. So Jen, why don't you get us started with our first question?
Sure, I'll start us off. So our first question comes to us from Dan in Connecticut. He wants to know why it was hailing outside when the temperature was 31 degrees. So very good question. I feel like this is something that we see a lot. So this wasn't actually hail. This is what's called sleet. And sleet is what happens when, you're thinking about the atmosphere, way up in the atmosphere, things start out more in a like snowflake form. And then as you get farther down into the atmosphere, it enters into this warm air layer where that snowflake ice melts and then will refreeze again before it hits the surface. And that's how you end up with this sleet pellet. Hail we typically associate with more of our summertime thunderstorms, with processes with that, where sleet is more what is focused during the winter.
But it kind of bounces around, and I can understand the discrepancy, I guess, between the two. When you get that the sleet and kind of just bounces around, and it causes more trouble though than hail. Well, I actually should take that back, because if you do get big hail, it could cause problems.
Yeah, that is true. But I guess the difference is for roadways and travel, it's normally sleet causing the bigger problem than hail. Every now and again they have to plow hail, out in the Rockies or something crazy like that. But yeah, for us up in our neck of the woods, normally sleet is the bigger problem for those travel disruptions and for our snow and ice removal clients.
Yeah, so. and like you said, that it's the different process, summer versus winter. Summertime it's hot. If it's
hot
snowing,
humid,
it's well up in the atmosphere, but it's that hailstone that goes up and down with the updrafts and downdrafts, and then it falls to the ground once it's finally heavy enough, as opposed to sleet where it's kind of half frozen, if you will. But and I'll tell you, sleet, and we've talked about this before in the winter, when Mike and me and Jen are all forecasting winter events, the sleet's almost always like the big wild card in a snowstorm or any kind of winter system. It's kind of a primer for snow too. We talk about that also.
And it's really difficult to remove one in comparison to snow, for sure.
Yeah, when that sleet comes down and it kind of lays on the pavement, and then it actually lets the pavement kind of refrigerate a bit, and then if you get snow on top of that,
yes,
it causes bigger issues.
Now, it can actually hail in the winter time.
I was just going to say, technically, I guess it could hail in the winter.
Yes.
It actually did a couple years ago, if you remember, up in I think it was Massachusetts, or might have been Connecticut. There were a couple of thunderstorms,
Yes, I do
wintertime
remember this.
thunderstorms that developed, and it was just a mess. I mean, I know there was like freezing rain. There was actually hail. Now, it wasn't big hail; it was small hail, but it certainly was hail. But it was a little bit of a confusing factor because, as you mentioned, hail and sleet are two different formations. So, but this was hail because it was from an updraft. So it
Yeah, right.
wasn't developed from just refreezing liquid in the sky.
I remember that day because I remember Mike Mahalik, who covers he does New England in the winter. And we're like, what the heck is falling up there? Because we're getting all these different reports. Was it graupel? Was it hail? Was it sleet? It was kind of like all of the above almost. But yeah, it definitely had that convective nature. But at the same time, it was producing both winter and summertime precipitation almost. So, all right, well, let's move on to our next question. I'll take this one. It comes from Joe in New Jersey, and he was asking, why can it rain at 28 degrees, but yet it can snow at 37 degrees? And of course, it can rain at 37 also. We know why that would happen. But rain at 28 degrees is actually rain falling in liquid form. However, at that point, it becomes freezing rain. And I think a lot of folks confuse, what freezing rain is versus other types of winter precipitation. So basically, freezing rain is just like I said, it's liquid rain. You walk outside, it hits your skin, it hits anywhere else, and it's wet. It's just kind of saturating everything. However, when that temperature is 28 degrees, 29 degrees, as long as it's below 32, it'll freeze on the surface of anything that's outside. So exposed surfaces, especially railings, cars, what have you. Things get slick pretty quick. Mailboxes, folks will go outside. Oh wow, it's raining out here, but then there's already a layer of ice on there. However, the roads though become the big issue, and while they may not freeze as fast as like exposed surfaces, like I just mentioned, cars and mailboxes and metal objects, but once we do get that freezing rain to accumulate on the roadways, that's when we have big issues. And it's probably the most complicated winter precipitation that we have to deal with, not only forecasting, but traveling wise and removal of freezing rain and ice, because it's just it's not a good time when we have freezing rain anywhere.
Yeah, freezing rain is not good, especially like you mentioned. I mean, people don't realize that rain temperatures below freezing can be liquid.
That, and also think about when you're on the road, you can see snow, you can see sleet bouncing. You really can't see freezing rain forming. You just get that layer of black
Right,
ice.
and it usually comes from reports, and you start seeing like there's ice outside accumulating. So, and the reason why that happens now, if you think about the atmosphere, and typically the higher up you go, the colder it gets. 90% of the time when you're talking about the atmosphere. Same reason why mountaintops are a lot colder than like the valleys. However, a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but it's more susceptible in the winter where you actually have warmer air above the surface. So what's happening with the freezing rain is it's actually snowing above again. You think of it, I think Mike Mahalik used this as an example when we were talking about the precipitation types with the previous podcast. It's almost like an Oreo, and you have different layers of the atmosphere. So granted, it's snowing at like, let's say 8,000 feet. But then as you get towards the surface, there's a warm layer. And Jen just talked about this a little bit with the sleet. So if you have that snowflake falling through this warmish layer that's above freezing, it melts. Now, if that warm layer is pretty deep and it gets all the way down almost to the surface, let's say it gets all the way down to like 2,000 feet, where it's still above freezing, that raindrop now does not have enough time to change over to sleet or even back to snow. Like Jen said, it has a chance to go back to a mix of snow and sleet, or at least some kind of a frozen part of the precipitation. But in this case, it has no time, so it falls as liquid into that 28-degree layer, and again, it doesn't have time to freeze over, so it just freezes on contact, and That's the problem with that. So, and there's so many different problems with freezing rain, and we've seen it before. It doesn't take a lot either. And just a thin layer, a glaze of ice can cause big time problems on the roadways. So to that extent, let's explain why it can snow at 37 degrees. So you're thinking, oh, well, you go outside and it's a little cloudy out. There's some peaks of sun, but yeah, you look at your thermometer. Oh, it's 37 degrees. Yeah, it's not bad for winter. But then here comes a shower, and we'll touch more on snow showers and snow squalls in a while. But then again, it's 37 degrees and it starts to snow outside, and you're like, why? How can it snow at 37 degrees? Well, this is almost the reverse of freezing rain. So what happens here is it's cold above you pretty much all the way down to the ground. Maybe the bottom like 4,000 feet get above freezing, which is where you're at. We call it the boundary layer. So that precipitation is falling as snow all the way down to about 4,000 feet, 3,000 feet. And at that point, it goes above freezing, but it does not have enough time to melt or turn into rain. So it just falls as snow. Now, usually at 37 degrees, though, it's not going to stick to anything. It's just kind of wet everything. It'll melt on contact. But if it snows long enough, it'll actually bring the temperature back down towards freezing, which we've seen before with other snowstorms. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit later with a changeover event. But so there you have it. It can rain at 28 and snow at 37. You got to love weather.
And it can also snow even higher than 37. I don't know what the record is, but it can snow in the 40s. I've seen it snow in the 40s.
Yeah, as long as that temperature above you is below freezing, and if it's a deep layer of cold, and yeah, what's it like? I think that's kind of why we use 850 temp as a threshold, which is about 5,200 feet up. So
yeah, and 850
if
for the listeners is 850 millibars, which is a layer in the atmosphere above our heads. So it's high up there.
So if it can stay as snow at that point, usually it can make it to the ground as snow. So, all right, I think Mike's up next. Donna.
Yeah, Donna. So you asked here about snowflakes, and there's that saying, and I'm sure everyone's heard of it. No two snowflakes are alike, right? They're all different. Well, most of that is true, but actually, snowflakes can be very, very similar. And there was actually a study done by NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research. This scientist by the name of Nancy Knight, she actually found out that there were snowflakes that were very, very similar when you look at it at a microscopic level. So yes, at the surface and everything, it's it might look a little different, or maybe they all look the same. But even at the microscopic level, the way that the snowflake has formed is almost identical. Of course, there might be some small little things that are different, and the reason to why that's all why they're not totally the same is, well, I mean, it's very, very, very unlikely for the same flake to develop in the same way. I mean, there are so many factors as a snowflake is being developed in a cloud that you really just it almost be like you'd probably have a better odds of winning the lottery than having a snowflake be 100%, maybe 98% the same, maybe 97, but 100% is very, very rare and almost never recorded, because by the time snowflakes fall, they'll melt. And you can always make snowflakes in a lab, but again, it's very tough to get 100%. But again, with snowflakes, people think about the types of snowflakes there are. You see the typical
six-sided flake or whatever, six-pointed
or
flake.
Six-pointed, yes. 6, 7-sided, typical flakes you cut out. If you remember from second grade, first grade arts and crafts, making those snowflakes out of a single sheet of paper or a couple sheets of paper. That's one of the types of snowflakes that are out there. We call these dendrites, but there are other types of snowflakes out there, and I'm sure you will both know what I'm talking about. We have plates and we have needles and columns. And you might have noticed that sometimes whenever it's really, really cold out there, and the snow is almost kind of it almost looks like they're little icy sticks on the ground. Those are needles. Other times the dendrites, the typical snowflakes that you'll see, the more common ones in popular media, they'll be a little bit more condensed, a little bit more flatter. They don't really have the typical markings on them. They look very basic. Those are more of the plates. And then of course, if you want to go even farther, there are other types of precipitation, that's similar to snowflakes, like graupel, which is more like the Dippin' Dot style of precipitation.
And the easiest way to go out, and a lot of times if it's snowing, I'll just go outside. You go outside with like a darker, sweater or jacket, and you can actually watch them collect on. You can see exactly what kind of flakes or what kind of snow is falling. And to that extent, you can tell a lot about the atmosphere above you based on the type of snow that's falling, like Mike just said, whether it's dendrites or plates or needles. A lot of that tells us, where the freezing layer is, how far up, how thick is the snow growth zone. I'm getting a little technical there, but a lot of those things are telling of what's going on above your head, even though it's just, hey, it's snowing outside. But as a meteorologist, you learn about what you can tell about what's falling from the sky just based on that kind of stuff. So but we like the big clumpy ones, right?
Oh, the nice ones that make good snowmen, right? And snowballs. Yeah.
Yeah. When you get those, you get those big fat flakes, and it's a lot of time. A lot of times that'll happen too at the beginning of a snowstorm. You'll get the big fat flakes starting, and it'll start snowing pretty hard. Then the flake itself kind of gets a little smaller as it gets, the steadier snow moves in. But that's kind of a neat thing. But the big clumpy ones are the ones that accumulate fast, get all fluffy, and that's when you start to read on social media, oh, it's puking snow out here.
Those $50 size flakes. Those are something. Brad, looks like you're next, right, on the list here?
Yeah, we got a Mike there. Is that you, Mike, in Pennsylvania? No, you're in New Jersey.
Maybe it's Mike Mahalik.
But Mike has another precipitation type question. Wants to know what causes the snow to rain changeover that we see in some storms, or vice versa. And depending upon where you live, and especially if you live along the I-95 corridor here in the Northeast, it almost seems like every snowstorm or every storm, you're fighting the rain-snow line. Where is it going to set up? Is it going to move north through the storm, or is it going to go south through the storm? Is it going to collapse and just, change over to snow everywhere, or vice versa? So those are usually the biggest questions that we have to answer, not only to ourselves, but to our clients here at WeatherWorks, because, we got to try to let them know, are we changing over to snow? Are we changing over to rain? Because that's going to make a big difference in their decision making throughout the storm. So it always seems like I-95 is such a big rain snow line in the winter time. It doesn't matter what storm you have. It could have been cold, like bitter cold for 4 days previous to a storm, but somehow that rain snow line always gets involved. But if you have a rain changing to snow event, again, it's pretty self-explanatory. What's happening is usually you have a storm that's in the beginning of development, and you have kind of marginal cold air. Maybe it's some old cold air left over from a couple days ago, but at the same time, it may even be warming above you. So you start out with a lot of rain, or even a mix of rain and snow, and you go over to rain for a little while. But if you have a typical big storm that's developing like off the coast, a nor'easter, these kind of storms generate their own cold air. It's dynamically cooling, as we call it. And as the storm gets stronger, it brings in more cold air above, and it'll a lot of times change over that rain to snow. So you'll see that in the forecast sometimes too. Like, precipitation begins between 1 and 4 p.m., mainly as rain. But then as we get into this evening, steadier precipitation begins, and we'll start to transition over to snow. And then the snow becomes heavy at times. So, that's when the accumulations really get going. So that's kind of what we get when we see a rain changing to snow event. It's usually because of a strengthening system off the coast here in the Northeast, even in the Midwest. Once you get the main storm to the east of you, and you get that colder air to wrap in, that's when you see the changeover to snow. The other way, going from snow to rain, that happens a lot here in the Northeast when we have a storm that's usually going to the west of the region, and you still have cold air in place. So a lot of times the precipitation comes in, it's in the 20s, it's cold, you'll get some snow, but that snow will start to go through the process of changing over to rain. So you go from snow over to sleet, and then over to freezing rain, and eventually just plain old rain. Um, and again, that's usually when the storm is warming up or going to the west of you, because that warm air will actually get ahead of the system and change over everything over to rain. So, um, there's some caveats to that. Even a lot of times you get some cold air damming that we call it, where the cold air is really kind of stubborn to exit, and you'll get an extended period of freezing rain in some spots, and where it just kind of gets stuck in the Northeast and the nooks and crannies of New England, and sometimes it never changes over. That's a frustrating forecast, but then again, it is winter and it happens quite a bit. But if you get a big warm front coming in, it'll just flush out the cold air pretty quickly, and you'll change over to rain. So again, a lot of the storms, that's what we deal with, is either snow to rain or rain to snow, and we just kind of go with the flow.
Or sometimes you get those really crazy mixed events where even in like the most intense snowstorms, sometimes you'll get some sleet. Because, like you said, Brad, these big storms, they have a lot of energy, and sometimes they're strong enough, especially if you're on the coast, to inject some warmer air above our heads, and that could potentially cause a bit of a warm layer, which could melt the snow, and then it's so cold near the surface, because again, these big storms create their own cold air, it'll refreeze into sleet. And of course, not everybody likes sleet, because what that means is it's going to compact your snowfall, and it's going to make things, denser and just icier. So
I remember a storm, I don't even know when it was, but I can remember actually having freezing rain as low as like 21 degrees in one storm. It's just, there was such a warm layer in between everything that, and all the way down to the surface, or almost to the surface, because it was in the low 20s, but there was enough warm air right in between that it's just, there's that Oreo thing. You got the cold air in the bottom, you got cold air on top, but right in the middle, you got just enough warm air. And people are saying, well, it's 22 degrees. How can it be raining? Well, it's freezing rain, obviously, at that point, but it's crazy to think that could happen, and it does.
that's almost the worst case scenario. 20 something degrees and it's raining.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
Snow lovers and snow weenies like, why? It's a waste. Why are we wasting this?
No one likes that.
Yeah, no one.
You can't tell me with a straight face that you like freezing rain at 21 degrees. No one on this earth, I imagine, loves seeing.
Most people don't even like freezing rain at 31 degrees.
Most people don't like rain at 34 degrees. So nobody likes rain.
Is that cold? Just give me the snow.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
cold rain is not a fan.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, no, it's not good. Of course, we all like snow here. So let's hope for snow. I think this question comes in from Julia, Jen.
Yeah, so Julia in Maryland is curious about lightning in the winter.
Yes.
She's seen it before during a snowstorm, but how does this happen? And so I think to explain this a little bit, we need to talk about summer first. So thunder and lightning in the summer happens when there is something called CAPE, which is convective available
CAPE.
Potential energy. And pretty much this is like the energy in the atmosphere that is needed for thunder and lightning to occur. And a lot of times it is driven by hot and humid air. And instability is what we call that as well. And in the winter, how it happens is you get a little bit of that CAPE is there. Now, is it as much in the summer? Definitely not. But sometimes all you need is just a little bit of that CAPE to be present. And that's what allows that instability and that energy for it to thunder and lightning during snowstorms. Now, what drives it in the winter versus the summer? Obviously, the heat and humidity is not as much of a thing. So a lot of times in the winter, you'll see it when you have aspects of the snowstorm involved that allow for some of that CAPE to be present. And a lot of times you'll see the thunder and lightning in like a heavy banded snow. I don't know if you guys remember from, what was it, 2 years ago now, when Buffalo got absolutely slammed with that lake effect snow, and they were literally having insane amount of thunder and lightning. And that was just because dynamically the snow was so heavy and banded, and it allowed for that instability to flourish and for that thunder and lightning to occur.
Of course, the most famous thunder snow is good old Jim Cantori.
Yes. I was watching that as a little kid.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, he was doing a live shot, and I'm sure everyone's seen it before. And he's just like, oh, was that lightning? And then sure enough, we had the thunder right after, and he was going crazy. Yeah.
You say, "Oh my
I mean, like you said,
God!"
that's a sign of a very dynamic atmosphere. Usually, and you get them in nor'easters too. You get that big setup of heavier banded snow, and not only do you get the heavy snow, and usually when you do get the thunder and lightning, you're probably under some kind of a 1 inch plus band that, or even more than that. And it's producing snow, quickly.
I wonder if anyone's ever gotten struck by lightning in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
That would be a good statistic to look up. I'm not sure.
I know it's mostly cloud to cloud, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's probably mostly cloud to cloud. I don't know if there's any bolts, but I guess it's possible if you get lightning.
Yeah, well, maybe the next time there's a big storm in like the Great Lakes, and like just put up like a 20-foot pole and see if lightning will strike it. And maybe just have something to attract the lightning, and see. But that'd be interesting to see if like there's been any strikes
Well,
from
hopefully
thunder
most
snow.
people. Yeah, I mean, well, I guess during like not as many people outside either in the winter, but you never know. It's a weird situation, people skiing or something in a snowstorm. I mean, I guess it's possible.
Speaking of, I guess more intense snow, we have another question that comes in from Janet from good old New York. She wants to know the difference between just a snow shower and a snow squall. And I think when you look at it from just a broad view, obviously, squall, you think, thing is coming in very, very heavy. It's pretty intense. But of course, a snow shower, if you think like a rain shower, it's like just a very light shower. So really, the difference between a snow shower and a snow squall, just from the basic term, is that a snow shower is essentially a lighter, kind of more of a sporadic kind of snow. It could be light. It could be kind of on the moderate side. But again, usually snow showers are not long lasting. They're very quick. We're not talking like a snow shower that lasts like 3 hours long. At that point maybe it goes to like being a flurry. So again, it also depends on the visibility too, and I think visibility is another big factor with snow showers and snow squalls. Snow showers don't really have lower visibility. They sometimes can, especially if there's wind. But snow showers typically, and when I say visibility, I mean we measure snow in terms of intensity based on the visibility, as in how far you can see away from a certain point to a distance. So usually whenever things get down to like 2 or 1 mile visibility, you're starting to get pretty steady and heavy. But again, most snow showers are in the realm of like a 5 to like a 7 mile snow visibility factor. Snow squalls, though, they take the cake, and they can sometimes get down to a half-mile visibility or less. And if you think about how fog is and how like half-mile, quarter-mile fog is, you can barely see. Well, snow squall is kind of similar in terms of the sight issues there, in the impairment of your visual viewing of the snow. That's why snow squalls are pretty dangerous, because they can come in quick, out of nowhere. It's almost like a dust storm, except it's snow. Because all of a sudden it's fine, it's great, it's sunny, clouds roll in, then all of a sudden you feel the wind come through and just snow starts coming in out of nowhere. And then it lowers the visibility. It's coming down really good. It could be gusty. I don't think it's enough to be blizzard criteria, but it can be sometimes very windy. And we see snow squalls all the time. They are also one of the most dangerous types of winter precipitation, not because it's snow, but because of just how quick and like, how dangerous they can be, how people get caught off guard by them. Especially if you're on the roads. I think a majority of accidents during wintertime happen during snow squalls, like really big pileups, because people are driving, they see it's starting to snow up ahead, and then of course all of a sudden they don't realize the road is now snow covered and you can barely see in front of you, and then all of a sudden it's a 20-car pileup. And we've seen that so many times.
Yeah, and that's one of those situations I mentioned before with the temperature. It could be 37 degrees and sunshine and clouds mix, but you get one of those squalls, it'll drop that temperature down to 32 real fast, and you can cover up that road.
Exactly, because the heavier the snow, the better it can cool the column of air above our heads. And then, of course, if the ground is, eventually will get to 32, it'll cover. I mean, intensity can sometimes overtake ground temperatures as well. It might be 34 degrees, but if you have very heavy snow that's falling for 10, 15 minutes, it's going to start to cover. And it's going to start becoming a little slushy, a little bit slick. And if you're driving at 65 miles an hour on the road and there's half-mile visibility and it's a bit slushy, some people will tend to put their foot on the brake, and we all know that's not a good idea. And then all of a sudden you spin out, and it'll just it's a domino effect. So that's why snow squalls are not good. They also don't produce a lot of snow. Typically, they will produce enough, coatings to upwards of an inch or two. So they're not big producers of snowfall amounts. But what they do lack in that, they make up for just the intense factor.
When we know there's going to be a day with a good chance of snow squalls, the problem is radar. It can help to a point, but there's also snow squalls don't really climb that high in the atmosphere. They may only be a couple thousand feet above, and if that radar beam is let's take Mount Holly's radar, which is down near Trenton in Jersey, and you're tracking snow showers coming out of central Pennsylvania, and then they just disappear, and you're like, well, did they just fall apart? But no, at that point, it's like the radar beam is shooting above the snow. So even though that snow squall is there, and you don't see it on radar, people are like, there's nothing on radar, but the snow squall is still there usually, and it could still cause problems. But yeah, those are dangerous in the wintertime, and really they're it doesn't matter what kind of pattern you're in. If you get that one day even of cold air between November and March, you can get those snow squalls, and they can cause some problems for sure, especially if they hit like the evening rush hour or the morning rush hour. Big time problems, like Mike said.
Exactly. Yeah, just basically snow squall, take it slow. Maybe not enough to get off the road, but just take it slow, drive very slow, and just watch your surroundings, because it can go from 0 to 100 very quickly.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I know, because there was that really bad one on Route 81 out in near Hazleton a couple of years ago, and we read about them all the time. You see them in like other states, Michigan, and when these things just come on out of nowhere, and people just they don't slow down fast enough. But all right, we got a couple more here. I'm gonna do my last one. So this comes to us from Robert in Massachusetts, and he wants to know: is it ever too cold to snow? It's a good question, because it's never too cold to snow. I mean, if you're below freezing or the atmosphere above you is below 32, you can produce ice crystals and snowflakes. It can snow. However, as you get really cold, we're talking like temperatures, as you get down towards minus, 5, 10, 20 degrees Fahrenheit. If you notice when you get that cold, it's usually pretty damn dry outside. So that's the problem. Moisture becomes the issue, not so much the cold air. There's just not enough to go around. There's not enough, you're talking such a low amount of moisture in the atmosphere. It just doesn't have enough to create snowflakes. What you do get sometimes then is what's called diamond dust, where it's almost like it's just little frozen droplets of water everywhere, because it's so cold. I don't really want to get into the details with that, but that's kind of what it is. It's just usually just too dry to snow at some point. So the best the snow itself, if you want a good snow, it's got to usually be between 20 and 30 degrees. That's probably the best temperature to get some decent snow. As you get below 20, it gets a little more drier. The snowflakes get a little smaller, although the ratios go up, and we talk about that a lot of times in the winter. You can get an inch of snow out of 0.02 or 0.03 of precipitation, versus an inch of snow where it might take you 0.15 if the temperature is around 32, 33 degrees. So that does change things around a little bit. And you'll hear actually a lot of meteorologists talk about that. What's the ratio? 10-to-1 is a basic ratio. It takes 10 inches of or 1 inch of rain to produce 10 inches of snow, but that's like the standard. But if it can go down as far as 40-to-1 when it's really dry and cold, or it can just get as crappy as like 3-to-1 when you got just big, weird, rainy mixed snowflakes with that, which isn't going to produce much in the way of accumulation. So that goes a long way. But either way, it's never too cold to snow, but I think the dry weather becomes a bigger issue.
So diamond dust, that's what they're calling it, Brad?
Yeah, I know.
It's
No.
nothing else.
I'll look it up again. No, I know.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Diamond dust is a ground level cloud composed of tiny ice crystals. This meteorological phenomenon is also simply referred to as ice crystals, and is reported in the METAR code as IC. I didn't know that though. IC.
I see. Yes. Icy. Ever had icy before? An icy at a 7-Eleven?
Yeah.
No?
Slurpees.
Yeah, that's good
Slurpees.
stuff.
Slurpees. Yes. So one last question here.
This one comes out of Connecticut, and Bill wants to know, what is the benefit of brining the roadway?
The brine question.
The brine.
Yes,
Brine
so the
shrimp?
Brine.
Brine shrimp, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. So what brine is your liquid mixture of liquid with some type of, chemical compound, whether that's sodium chloride, magnesium chloride. And what it is you pretty much line your roadways with this brine pre the storm beginning. So I'm sure all of us have seen those mysterious
brine
white
line.
lines that are on the road, and you'll go, oh, what is, like, before I started working at WeatherWorks and learned a lot about snow and the snow and ice industry, I was like, oh, what are those lines? So that's that pre-treatment, that's that brine that goes down. And what it does is it pretty much, if it's down before your snow or ice starts falling from the sky, it prevents the bonding of that wintry precipitation to the roadway. At least at the onset, and you're then working more. It's exactly what the word is, pre-treatment. You're treating the road before it starts to.
Right. Usually it's about good 24 hours too before a storm gets there.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like brine, sometimes can. We'll sit, like Brad said, for a while, and people actually driving on the road can help it kind of disperse a little bit, especially if it is a little bit more of a, solid than it is a liquid. And yeah, it's helpful in that prevention of that snow or ice bonding versus working to remove the bond after it's already happened. Now, you get a foot of snow, brine's not going to hold off the whole thing, but it will at least delay that, that initial kind of pavement accumulation from occurring for a little bit. You can't use brine in all situations, though, and probably the biggest one that you can't use it in is when it is going to rain to start, because what is that going to do? It's going to wash all the brine away. And then when you turn to snow, it's going to be like nothing even happened. So a rain to snow event, you really can't pre-treat or brine, and that makes that flip over to snow and that accumulation kind of harder to plan out a little bit for. And we also might not brine in like low confidence or very localized snow situations, because then it's just a waste of money to put all this pre-treatment down and nothing happens, or it's a very local snow shower or something like that.
And those are valuable things that we learn at WeatherWorks too. When our clients will call us, can we pre-treat? And they mean either can we throw down some salt, can we do some brining? Like Jen said, if we know it's going to be cold leading up to the storm, there's no chance of rain, we tell everyone, yeah, by all means, pre-treat all you want. It's going to help for either way. It's whether it buys you a couple hours or a half a day, then by all means, go right ahead. But like Jen said, if it's going to rain first and then it's going to change over.
And that's regular rain. That's not freezing rain. So if it's freezing rain to snow, that you're still going to want to pre-treat for, because that's going to ice right on contact with the ground. If the ground temperature is at a below freezing temperature and everything like that. So it's only that plain rain where we really steer our clients away from pre-treating at the jump.
I know some place out in the Midwest too, they use like beet juice or like pickle juice even, different kinds of brine.
Yep, some use sand involved for some traction on the road. So.
And then, of course, the big joke sometimes, even with us, we'll all chat amongst ourselves, and people will be like, "Oh yeah, I drove into the office today. Did anyone notice the brine? Is there snow coming that we don't know about?" Because a lot of times, some municipalities may brine, thinking that, oh well, the storm, but the storm itself may not even occur, and we're just kind of questioning ourselves. Is there a forecast out there that we don't know about? Because
that's when we question ourselves, and that's also when we say those people need WeatherWorks.
Yeah, you're right.
Sometimes they brine the road ahead of time too, though. So sometimes if you have a big storm that you know is going to snow, they'll brine a day or so in advance, just so that they can get the salt to kind of distribute across the road. When cars drive over it, it helps to spread it out, and so. But yeah, there are those days where you gotta question yourself, like, oh yeah, they salted my road, and you're like, why? or maybe it's one of those situations, right, where it's a changeover event, but we know it's going to be rain to snow, and so it's like if you do salt and pre-treat beforehand, it's a little bit of a difficult situation there, because you don't want it to water down, but you also don't want to be caught off guard. So it's tough. I mean, I think these snow and ice contractors and Department of Public Works, they do a hard job because they have to go out there and determine when to go and salt. And when you have these mixed events, it doesn't make it easy for them at all. Because, like I said, you can't really salt when it's raining because it's going to be washed away. But if it's cold and it's going to be freezing rain, you kind of have to just throw it down. I mean, you might lose salt, but it's better than not salting, and all of a sudden you have an ice skating rink.
Well, I think that's great. We all had some good questions there. Folks out there, if you get any more questions, feel free, of course, to send them in to us. Again, our email address is the weatherlounge at weatherworksinc.com. And even if they're not winter questions, you got some questions, maybe we'll do one of these in next summer too. When we have more summertime precipitation to talk about, and we can talk more about lightning and the different types of lightning, even, and thunderstorms and flooding and things like that. So it's always a good topic. But good conversation, Jen and Mike. That was fun.
Yeah, no, this is a good conversation.
Yeah, that was. And it's always a good, it's always good to refresh on things that or to even, like, I find that I learn and reiterate things that I know that's like second nature by trying to explain it to someone in more layman's terms versus what I learned in school from a textbook. So this has been, great, I think, just across the board, not only for our listeners here, but for us too.
Yeah, it is. All right. Well, that's about it then. Again, send us your questions if you got any more. And don't forget, you can always check us out on all the social platforms out there. And of course, you can always check us out. Our website is weatherworksinc.com. All right, that'll do it for this episode here in the Weather Lounge. We will see you back here next time. Have a great winter, everyone. Enjoy.
That's a wrap on this week's episode of the Weather Lounge podcast. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on all your favorite podcasting platforms so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have questions or comments? Just email us at weatherlounge@weatherworksinc.com. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can also learn more about our parent company, WeatherWorks, by visiting weatherworksinc.com and checking them out on social media as well. Thanks again for joining us, and until next time, stay curious and stay weather-wise.